Well, it finally happened. It's been rumored for so long, every year at this time, that Nick Saban was going to retire, resign, whatever the case may be. When I was a young sports writer many, many years ago, there were standing jokes like that went on when you come back from dinner and go to the sports department and say, "What's going on?" They say, "Oh, nothing. Casey Stengel died, Johnny Unitas was traded, etc." In later years, if there was such jocularity in the sports department of papers, which I rather doubt, you'd hear things like, "Well, Nick Saban retired." They go, "Ha, ha, ha, sure he did." Well, this time, that's true. Nick Saban is no longer in college football. As of today, he told his players Wednesday, he's retiring from college football. Wow, what a story. We'll follow that story tonight with our friends. We've got Rob Brown on the sideline standing by for a quick take. He's all over the SEC plus the state of Alabama. Then we'll get with David Moulton, veteran, longtime observer of SEC football, and, of course, a member of the broadcast crew at CBS at one time broadcast college football in the SEC. And then our friend Loren Meadows, plus reaction from you. Want to hear from you tonight. It's a big story, not unanticipated yet shocking. Nick Saban no longer in college football. What's it going to be like? Well, the body's not even warm yet, and not even cold, and people are giving us replacements and people to follow. Who's going to be the coach at Alabama? We'll talk to Rob Brown next, right here on the Buddy Martin Show.
Again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking, but be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye!
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Well, and Nick Saban is now gone from college football. The news coming out today, Saban told his players on Wednesday, stepping down. Remark reportedly made by Saban to friends at the SEC championship game. "I'm getting too old for this shit." Well, you never thought he'd get too old. Even at 72, it looked like he was good for another 4 or 5 years. Many people expected he'd coach for a long time, but today, Nick Saban, a man who will go down as the greatest of all time. You can argue about that if you like, but it's a fact. And you look at his record on what he did, he has been the GOAT. I'll go right to Rob Brown, sidelines, who covers the SEC. He's got a reaction from the state of Alabama, where he has worked, lived, whatever, and broadcast from. Let's see what our friend Rob's got to say. Good evening to you, Rob. How you doing?
Doing good. It is a crazy story. You walk outside and the phone's blowing up from everybody. Nick Saban retiring. It doesn't seem real, but man, Kevin Skarbinski talked about it late November on the show with that conversation he had with Wimp Sanderson. When Wimp Sanderson asked him out of the blue, "What are you hearing about Nick Saban stepping down?" So it's happening, but Alabama won't be going away, but it'll be a change, and it's not going to be an easy transition. It never is.
I don't know what your reaction was. You know, I said in my open, I wrote the tease for the show. Many years ago, when the old sports writers of today were young, it's hard to believe they were one time, there was a standard joke that went around back when jocularity was a thing that was common among sports departments, when they had sports departments. And it was a old joke. The guys would go out for dinner, come back, say, "All right, guys, what's happening back there?" And someone would say, like, "Well, Casey Stengel died, ha, ha, ha," whatever. "Johnny Unitas was traded, ha, ha, ha." Always some story like that. Later, that morphed into, well, Nick Saban retired. Every year at this time, we'd hear it. Well, he's going to try this time. Okay, well, we got to a point where it was like crying wolf. you didn't really believe it, and you think, well, he will either wait and win the national championship and step down or whatever. Well, he had a heck of a year. Was this close to it. Did one of his best coaching jobs, and finally said, "I'm done. I'm finished." Now the fun starts. The recruits start backtracking and start decommitting, as they've started today already. The body's not even cold, and they're saying, "Who's the next coach? Who's it going to be?" Let's start right there. What names are you hearing? Rob, you talked to a bunch of Alabama people today. What names have you heard as the replacement for Nick Saban?
Well, I mean, the number one name that I'm hearing is Dan Lanning. And I'm hearing that Alabama's already raised the money quickly to buy him out at Oregon and bring him in. He was an analyst for Nick Saban at Alabama. Also at Georgia as linebacker coach and defensive coordinator for several years recently. But he's only been in Oregon 2 years. That's going to be the number one coach I see them going after is Dan Lanning. And until they're told no, they're not going to stop. But it's hard to get your first choice. Lane Kiffin is going to be a name Ole Miss people are worried about. Mm-hmm. I'm being told by some pretty smart Alabama people that Alabama will not offer Lane Kiffin. He's a hell of a coach. Doesn't mean that they won't, but I think that's another one. And Franz Beard called me this morning. We were talking about a guy, Jed Fish, used to coach quarterbacks at PK on high school. Mm-hmm. Steve Spurrier brought him on as a GA. I think he's got some time with Bill Belichick. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't go after him. Yeah, he's at Arizona. In the third year, they won 10 games, beat Oklahoma in the bowl game. But Dan Lanning will be number one, and we're going to talk on our show Sidelines tomorrow with Matt Dean. His son, Tyler, is director of scouting at Oregon, so we'll be getting some information we'll pass along to you tomorrow as soon as we hear it.
Good, and I know you got some things cooking with the new show and some people coming aboard. We'll talk about it another time. We're excited about that. Somebody I know pretty well. And good for you and you guys. And I think Frank's on here too. We're going to be really rushed for time here because we got David Moulton at 15 after. We're going to try to get a quick comment from Frank Duffy. And just give me your thoughts right now as a guy who worked across the street on the other side of the bridge from Alabama at Auburn for years, Auburn man who broadcast out of there. You know the state well. What do you think the state of the state is right now in Alabama?
I think a lot of people are worried. Alabama people are, because if it's true that all these players have a 30-day window to move around, you could have it could be crazy. That's been the fear of Alabama people for a long time is what's going to happen when Nick Saban steps down. Auburn, they've been trying to flip that 5-star wide receiver Ryan Williams from Alabama. I've always felt like he was going to sign with Auburn in February, but it's going to open things up. But knowing Alabama as they are, they're not going away. Their boosters are rallying. They're raising money. You talk about fundraisers like SMU did recently, 7 days, $150 million. Alabama's got some very, very strong boosters, and they're raising money. They're going to go out there and get the best coach they think that is in America, and it's going to be hard to tell them no, just like they did with Nick Saban. So I don't think if you let your guard down with Alabama, you're a damn fool. You better be prepared. They're not going away. You better just ramp up what you're doing and expect more of a fight. But it's going to create it's confusion, but it'll be short-lived.
I'll ask you this question. We're bringing in Frank for a quick comment because we're going to hit the road here to meet our deadline with our friend David Moulton. You're Alabama. You can get the best. Why wouldn't you do the obvious thing, even though you might not get him, and say, take out the money and pay Kirby Smart $20 million a year to coach Alabama, take him from the team that's won the national championship 2 of the last 3 years. Why not try that?
I bet they will. But I think Dan Lanning will be their first choice, and it's going to be hard for Dan Lanning.
Wait. They would take Dan Lanning over Kirby Smart?
I'm saying that's going to be their first choice. But no, if they could get Kirby Smart to come back, they'll take it. No, I don't think there's no question. He spent 9 years there. He loved his time at Alabama. Buddy, that's going to be the question people are going to be talking about all night. We got Kevin Skarbinski on the show tomorrow morning We're going to be talking with him about it. I think anything's on the table, as you famously said toward the end of the Dan Mullen era. I won't be surprised that they don't make a run at Kirby, but I think their first choice, because Kirby's probably going to tell them no, is going to be Dan Lanning.
And Georgia's been preparing for this day. They got their war chest out there.
Oh, yeah. And they've got money. Everybody's got money. Now they're going to have to spend it. This is going to be a tectonic plate. So there's going to be reverberations around the country from what is happening at Alabama, because there are going to be a lot of changes. You better get ready for it, fans. And it's hadn't happened in a long time, but there'll be a ripple effect, a big one.
Yeah, here's a guy we know right there. We'll get him on just a second. Frank Duffy, on with you, Frank. Frank, he is the guy I'd like to be. I'll put it that life he's got to go. Let's see what he's going on with this guy right now. Hold on. Good evening to you there, Frank. If I can get the right button to work. Good evening to you, Frank Duffy. How you doing?
Good evening, my friend Buddy and my good buddy Rob Brown. It is a tremendous night for us LSU fans. Our long national nightmare is now over. It's been like a bad dream that we've been reliving over and over again for 18 years. I'm just happy the GOAT goes off with only 6 at Alabama, and we didn't have to suffer through a 7th. Hopefully he remembers his first. Everyone remembers their first, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
With LSU.
Yeah.
I think as the replacement, I think Rob is right. I think Dan Lanning is going to be the first option. However, I have just heard from a good buddy of mine, Scott Alexander in New Orleans, that Dan Lanning was the odds-on favorite about an hour ago in Las Vegas. Lane Kiffin has now taken over the top spot as the odds-on favorite to replace Nick Saban.
Wow, I'm surprised. I just think he burned some bridges at Alabama that he wouldn't get that first nod. In my opinion, I'm not saying he wouldn't be a good choice. He would be a good choice. But
well, buddy, I think what's going to happen, if they give Saban input, it will not be Lane Kiffin. If the hierarchy at Alabama goes on and makes the decision on their own, it very well could be Lane Kiffin. I don't think Kirby Smart will ever leave Georgia. I think that is where he will retire, because when Mama calls, it's hard to leave. Mm-hmm. And man, has Dabo Swinney stock dropped like a rock?
Yeah, really.
Atlantic Ocean. Holy mackerel. He's not even getting a whiff.
Yeah, 2 years ago, his name was being mentioned as a guy.
Exactly.
And now suddenly, this is a topsy-turvy world of college football as we know it. As 3 college football aficionados, we've done this show many times on the Buddy Barton Show. Done the show on the sidelines. On the sidelines was Frank and Rob's show, which is heard 5 days a week. I forget now. Is it 8 days a week?
6 days.
Monday through Saturday. How come you can't work a couple more days in there? So
got a duck hunt on Sundays.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So Rob Brown, Frank Duffy, thanks very much for being on the show tonight. And keep us posted up there, Rob, in Alabama. That's what's going to have you back on later on and tell us what's going on with the temperature. And anything could happen. Anything can happen. And as you say, not too long ago, Dan Lanning was the choice. And now in Vegas, you're saying, Frank, you're saying that Kiffin has moved ahead of him in Vegas?
The latest line, he is now the favorite.
Wow. That surprises me and love. Does it surprise you guys? Yeah.
No,
all right, guys.
Nothing surprises me.
No,
Butch Jones is on the way, too.
Please don't say that. Dan Mullen is coming next. Yes. All right, guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thanks very much. You guys are doing a good show on Sideline. Speaking of good shows, I think I lost my guy. Come back. Where are you, David? Oh, my gosh. Sorry, David. Get me back there. All right, I'll take probably the spot. We'll come back, and David Moulton will be on the program with us. There he is right there. Stand by, David. We're going to take a break and get right to you. So I will do the spot. Good evening to you, David. We're coming right back to get you. Can't wait to get your thoughts here tonight on the breaking news story that Nick Saban is no longer in college football. It just doesn't sound right, does it? It just doesn't sound right. We knew it was coming, but just didn't feel like it would be this soon. Stand by. Jeffrey Meldon. Jeffrey, you do a show where you ask a lot of questions. I've got one for you right now, okay, regarding how do you know whether your case is being handled right and what to do about it? In medicine, you can get a second opinion if you're not satisfied with the doctor's opinion that they have. And do you have that in law? Can you do that with lawyers?
Yeah, buddy. As a matter of fact, we get quite a few calls from folks that have signed up, particularly with the big box law firms, that they do a hell of a good job of putting ads on TV, but after that, they don't really measure up to the way we try to create a client experience that's outstanding. And we're always willing to review a case and give a second opinion, just like with a doctor, because not all law firms are created equal.
I guess that's the normal thing. Just go to Meldon Law, Google it, and find out, and just give them a call. And like you say, if you come in, you get to see a Meldon. You don't get shuffled off to somebody else. You get to see a Meldon, and that's good to know, because a lot of people don't know how to do that stuff, like me. And maybe you can coach us through. So Meldon Law, they won't back down. They will take your questions about your case if you have a question.
Yes, whether it's a new case or an existing case, give us a call. We'd be glad to go over it with you. There's no charge to review your case with you. And a lot of times it makes good sense just to get a second opinion.
Good stuff from Meldon Law. They don't back down, but they will give you a second opinion. All right, thanks, Jeffrey Meldon. Back with us on our regular crew tonight. He's got fuzz on his face. Boy, he gets off that circuit and goes, stop eating some big hot dogs. And now he's letting it all hang out, brother.
I still got a couple games left, but yeah, I do need to shave.
Me too. How you doing, David? Were you shocked? You weren't shocked tonight, were you? About Saben?
I was more shocked about Pete Carroll.
Getting fired.
I mean, buddy, thinking back 6 months, I mean, there were whispers before the season started, SEC media days, if you're trying to put things together. When I saw that he and Miss Terry purchased that home in Jupiter in the summer for $17 million, I go, yeah, that's not a lake house. That's not a place you're spending 2-3 weeks in the summer. That's a retirement home. And are you going to purchase your retirement home 4 or 5 years early? Or are you purchasing it 6 months early?
I hear you.
Paul Feinbaum said publicly at SEC Media Days that this was Saban's last year. So it was out there, But to me, it's kind of like, it's college basketball without Wooden.
Yeah, it is. Exactly.
I mean, this is arguably the best to ever do it, and he did it in the modern era. And it's difficult, for as great as Coach Bryant was, and Steve and Bobby and what have you. I mean, I think if Bobby Bowden in Florida State got to play with the playoff format that Nick got to play with at Alabama, with all those years that Bobby finished in the top 4, you think, buddy, that Florida State might have made the playoff as often as Nick did. It would have been, if you take Bobby's era and put it in Nick's era, I think Florida State's record would have been close. Can't say it would have equaled it or bettered it, but I do think it would have been in the area code. But, I mean, how often, buddy, that you can say the best to ever do it is retired.
I hate that word GOAT, but I can't deny it's what it is. I love Bear Bryant. I thought what he did for college football was fantastic. He was a legendary figure. Nobody could touch him as a coach. And he had a lot of notches in his gun barrel, guys he beat. But the bottom line is, if you want to look at it, when you just read it, 6 national championships. Also won one at LSU, but 7. 7 is part of his career. Why they consider the GOAT? We know we've heard questions about Saban's future every year at this time. We can, oh yeah, sure. I said earlier on this program, when I was a young sports writer, and sports writing departments were more jocular than they are today, and they had fun. There was an old joke that would go around. Guys would go to dinner and come back and say, anything going on while I'm gone? They say, no, Casey Stengel died, ha, ha, ha. Or Johnny Unitas was trained, ha, ha, ha. And it got to be where in the last 10 or 12 years, Nick Saban retired, ha, ha, ha. Well, it really did happen. It's just hard to it's hard to imagine the game without Nick Saban. Alabama.
buddy, his impact, we love Bear Bryant, Tom Osborne, Bobby, Joe Paterno, whoever it is, Leahy, Rockney, whatever. But the SEC, Nick helped make the SEC the best conference in the country and then proceeded to dominate it. The SEC was even when Steve was doing what he did at Florida in the 90s, the SEC was still seen as a regional conference. Even when Bear Bryant and Vaught and others were doing what they did in the 50s and 60s and 70s in the SEC, it was still seen as largely a regional conference. Well, during Nick's time, the SEC became the conference, the national conference. And then he proceeded to dominate it. I mean, put it this way. If we are to go before a jury and argue the greatest college coach of all time, I want to argue Saban.
Well, the modern era was certainly the peak, and for the SEC, he did dominate it. I remember when your colleague, Gary, actually said on a show one time I was doing with him, we talked about how things were changing in the mid '90s, and he said, "Well, one of the reasons is that SEC is getting stronger because they're getting all the quarterbacks and the coaches. They're going to go on and run, and of course they did that very thing, and dominated it. And of course, who rose from that? Nick Saban dominated that. So,
right. And I mean, Steve changed the conference. He did."
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Steve Spurrier is a Rushmore figure in the SEC. There's no question. But I mean, buddy, and if those of you watching who are at least, middle-aged or older, I mean, when Nick left Michigan State for LSU, people thought he was nuts. They're like, what are you doing leaving the Big Ten for the SEC? And he went, yeah, that's the number one program in that state. Meanwhile, I'm a distant number two program in my state. Okay, so I'm going to get all the players in a state that produces top 5 talent in the country. How do you think I'm crazy? And the industry thought leaving Michigan State in '99 for LSU was bat blank crazy. And remember, buddy, Michigan State didn't allow him to bring anybody on staff with him. And so what did he do? He hired a bunch of the Muschamps and the Smarts and the Jimbo Fishers of the world, and he attacked the landscape from a recruiting standpoint and a coaching standpoint. And I mean, Nick changed the conference, and you could argue then changed college football.
No question about it. I have a high regard for Saban. I know that we think of him as another version of Darth Vader by what have you, the call Spurrier. But the bottom line is, here's a guy who did two things I really, really appreciate. Number one, he gave players second chances, not necessarily for himself, but because he felt like that this kid needed a break, and maybe he had a bad upbringing and whatever, and he would give him, and he'd get criticized for it.
Yeah.
What are they doing to bring this guy? He's a criminal. He didn't care. He felt like there was something good about these kids, and he wanted to give them another chance. And then he took coaches who had been fired and rehabilitated them, brought back them to like Boys Town, Nick Saban's Boys Town, brought them back there and rehabilitated them and look at who they were. Look at their Hall of Fame.
Steve Sarkisian owes Nick Saban his second career.
Yeah, certainly. And he raised Kirby Smart, and we know what happened.
Have you heard Nick tell the story as to why it is that he gave players a second chance?
A little bit. I heard about it, but tell it again. It's a good story.
It's Muhsin Muhammad at Michigan State. And he talked to, hey, he got in trouble and the whole deal. But I thought deep down he was a good kid. I had promised his family and what have you. And I gave him a second chance. And he goes on to say, and Muhsin Muhammad, had a good career at Michigan State, played 13 plus years in the NFL. And now I think he's got a very prominent, illustrious career. In which you'd go, damn, that's impressive, whether he had played sports or not. And Nick Saban goes, what if I had thrown him aside?
Quick score, Florida was up 17-12 on Ole Miss basketball game. If you care to follow that tonight.
By the way,
yeah.
how about UCF? How about UCF rallying from 8 down at the half to knock off Kansas?
I didn't know that. I've been out today doing other things. But
I understand a few things going on, but wow, what a good win for them.
Yeah,
life in the Big 12, and they knock off Kansas.
Yeah, and life is about to get better for them. They got Florida in the down years, and it looks like that they're going to have a nice run there, a chance to restore and take that program. Listen, I remember when FSU was UCF, trying to get a break, and then Charlie Pell got caught cheating, and everything changed. They started getting the top athletes, and it can happen. Watch it. I remember the days, David, when I was a young sports writer, when FSU couldn't even get on the schedule with an SEC team. They wouldn't even schedule them, and this is how far a program can turn. So good for the state of Florida and good for UCF. Got to see that. So, I was reading a couple of comments, guys like Herb Street, et cetera, surprised, not shocked by Coach Saban stepping down. Best to ever do it. From 2008, 2023, compile a record of 199-16. That's an average of 12 wins the last 16 seasons. As consistent and good as the sport has ever seen. Thank you, Coach, for all of the great sports, the great sport of college football. Excited to see what's next. So there you go. I mean, my friends over there from, I was just had on a minute ago, Frank Duffy, who's an inveterate fan for LSU forever. So I'm so happy, finally, that we got rid of that guy. He left us high and dry, whatever. So you get different responses. But
who's the guy now? Who's the guy, buddy?
Well, I was going to ask you that. I just heard Duffy told me that he just heard that Lane Kiffin suddenly moved to the favorite in Vegas.
I didn't mean that. I just meant, how like when Krzyzewski walked away, that it was like, well, who's now the the coaching icon? Because Boeheim, Roy Williams, and Krzyzewski all left in a short period of time, and it's probably either Bill Self or Tom Izzo. Right. But seriously, now in college football,
I think it's Kirby. I think it's Kirby. Right
wow.
Now. Yeah.
Wow.
I do. What do you think it is?
I don't know if there is. I think maybe the podium is empty, to be honest with you. I think somebody has to grow into it to be. Urban's retired. Steve's retired.
Urban would be in if he had coached again, but he's not going to coach.
Right.
So
I don't know if anybody is.
No, I can understand that. Yeah.
I mean, it's not Harbaugh.
Harbaugh definitely now. Harbaugh's not going to be in the league.
It wasn't that long ago we might have said Dabo, but I'm
looking at a list right here. Somebody put out earlier today, way early, and I remember 2 years ago it was probably between Dabo number one. That's not happened. Dan Lanning there supposedly is the guy. He's been ordained. Well, Kalen DeBoer, no, not yet. He's had a heck of a job. He's not ready to go to Alabama. Lane Kiffin, except for he got some bad grades when he was there, would be an excellent choice for him. And then Mario Cristobal, no. Come off the Mario Cristobal thing, okay? That ship has sailed for the moment. So I think you're right. There's not one. If it was one, Kirby would be it.
Well, remember this about Dan Lanning. Nick gave him his start as a GA. And then Dan went away for a couple years. And in 2018, Nick was on the verge of hiring him back, and Kirby beat him to it by 2 days. And Nick always, kind of about that one, got away. And we all know what Dan did at Georgia. And then now he's gone and had 2 really good years at Oregon. Here's my thing, buddy. Do you really want to be the guy to replace Nick Saban?
No, and never follow the greatest of all time. I think Ron Zook learned that.
Right. I mean, what if you're Dan Lanning, do you just use this and turn around to Phil Knight and Nike and go, why don't you throw a little bit more money on the pile and I ain't going anywhere?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember very well it happened when the Bears stepped down. I had a conversation. I was living in New York. I was at home of Ray Perkins, then the head coach of the New York Giants.
Yeah.
We were having steaks, grilling out on a holiday. It was just the 2 of us there. And I said, what are you going to do when Mama calls? What are you going to do because when it comes down to Bryant retiring, there'll be 4 guys, and you'll be one of them. Pick. He didn't even hesitate. He said, I'd go. Really? Oh, yeah, I would go. The New York Giants head coach didn't bat an eye. I would go. and he did. He wound up, as you know, and he had a rough go following him. And one of the worst things he ever did, I get why he did it, was he went into Tuscaloosa and took down the fabled tower that Brian coached in.
Right.
And that was his coach. I was there and watched him coach Ray Perkins for that tower. So I mean, it's tough to be that guy, yet you got to start somewhere. And who wouldn't want that job?
Well, the adage always is you don't want to be the guy that replaces the guy.
Right,
you want to be
exactly.
the guy after the guy who
That's
replaced
right.
the guy.
Exactly. Right. So I don't know. But then if you were hiring there, and I said this earlier, okay, the obvious, Kirby. Well, Kirby's not going to take it because. But I said, if you're Alabama and you can do what you want to, write him a $20 million check and say for 5 years, come coach here. But make him turn it down. Make him turn it down.
Okay, he would though, because he's Georgia's where his heart is. That's where he played. So
I get it. I think you're right, but you got to try, don't you?
I mean, I do think I have to have a long conversation with Dabo and go, listen, dude, we need to talk about the transfer portal. Why are you allergic to it? Because I think Clemson just went another recruiting season without taking a transfer. Well, that's not going to fly at Alabama.
No.
Listen, this might upset some people, but if I was Alabama, Mike Norvell would be at the bottom of my list. Now, I don't think Mike's a good enough recruiter. Mike's a good to very good recruiter.
The bottom or the top? Which one do you mean?
No, at the bottom. He'd be like, if you give me an index card, I write 5 guys on it. I'd have Mike Norvell in the 4 or 5 ball.
Okay.
But he's not a great recruiter. He's a good to very good recruiter. Well, it's Alabama. You need to be a great recruiter. Listen, I would hire Lane. The irony is, I think Lane would step over family members to take the job, but this year would kill him because he's loaded at Ole Miss.
Oh, yeah.
He has set it up that this is going to be his year, and he's got a very easy schedule. I mean, this is his year to win an SEC championship and be a legit national player. For 1 year, this is it. He's got it lined up, and yet, I'm sorry, Alabama's on line 1, Lane. Here you go. It's now or never.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just wondering because Lane has made no secret of the fact he wants to replace Nick, but is the timing just wrong?
True. What would you do?
I would not replace Nick. No, come on.
Stay in your own lane.
I mean, think about it. If I get to Atlanta and lose, Nick went there, 10 times? How many times did he lose? Once. Urban and the Gators in 08.
Yeah.
I mean, Kirby lined up against Nick 3 times in Atlanta. Went 0 for 3.
Yeah.
And Kirby was the favorite in 2 of the 3.
Yeah.
I mean, so if I get to Atlanta and I'm not exceptional, they're going to go, Then think about it. How many times did he not just won the national title? How many times did he get? I mean, wasn't he in 8 championship games, won 6? I mean, am I going to do that? I mean, seriously, we all think highly of ourselves. Are we really going to do this? I mean, I don't want to be the guy. I don't. Sorry, I don't. Plus, what he was able to do, he got money out of boosters. What if I'm not able to get that kind of money out of the boosters? To pay the players. What if I'm a very good recruiter, but not, top 4 in the country every single year? I mean, buddy, I would, you can call me a wuss and scared chicken. I would just be like, you know what? I'm good. Let somebody else tackle this monster. I don't know if I'm up for it.
Good point. I tell you what, they're downplaying, not downplaying, but it's the dynamics of recruiting just changed today.
Totally.
The number 1 recruit in college football, the 5-star wide receiver from Ryan Williams, has decommitted from Alabama. And they asked him why, and he said one of the decisions was because of Saban.
Well, he said flat out, well, if he ain't there, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And I wonder how, Tuscaloosa is not this great place. It's fine. They got great facilities and what have you. But I mean, it's not Athens. I'll tell you that as college towns go, it's not. And they've put a lot of money and a lot of work into the, into T-Town, but it ain't Athens. You know,
It's
it
not
ain't
even
even
Oxford. Not even Oxford. Yeah, it was a cool place.
I don't know. I mean, come on. They're clearly. I don't care who they hire. They're going to slip. There's no way they stay at the level they've been at. I mean, even Nick was struggling to keep them at this level.
Well, let's look at it. Spurrier left Florida. Urban left Florida. The great coaches leave. Things change.
Yeah.
They don't stay the same.
No question.
And now the players are really a big factor.
Well,
they get the out now.
Now I'll say this, Billy Napier, dude. Here's your opening. You got 30 days now. Everybody who committed to Alabama
open season on Tuscaloosa
or has a scholarship at Alabama for 30 days can transfer, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Come on. You got to get some guys here, don't you?
I would think you have to. I'd be getting me a coach who coaches Alabama down there for one thing.
So, I mean, Kirby and Lane are certainly on the phone with Alabama scholarship players right now.
Yeah,
I hope
no
Billy
doubt.
Napier is also.
Kirby hadn't got a whole lot of room for him. That's his problem.
There's
his
a couple
5-star
guys with room for him.
No, there's some in there, I guarantee. They always want to get better, that's for sure. So I think it's very, very interesting. That's why I love college football, David. It's always changing all the time. This is a crazy year. We talked about it for 2 years here now, how crazy it's been. And by the time you think, well, this is really going to be really not fun and there's nothing going on, you're tired of the portal, you're tired of all this stuff, boom, it changes. And now we have a new game.
And some people don't like it. I mean, even Dion sent out a tweet tonight that said, I knew it was coming, but I didn't know it was coming now. And he thinks that the changes in the sport drove Nick out.
That's my next question to you.
And Dion's gotten to know Nick. Obviously, they've done commercials together, and then Dion's gone to him for advice, and they've become friendly. And Dion, at least based on what he sent out on Twitter or X or Twix, whatever you're calling it, he said that he feels the dynamic in the sport right now drove Nick into retirement. There's an audio clip making the rounds now of pregame at the SEC championship.
And Nick saying I'm getting too old for this shit.
Kirby, I'm too old for this blank. And he is 72.
No.
I mean, what more do you have to do?
Well, our mortals do age, even though we don't necessarily believe it. We try to keep him from aging. But
if you've been interesting, does he stop dyeing his hair now? I mean, he tried to look as young as possible
back there,
for recruiting. Now that he doesn't have to recruit anymore, he let a little salt invade the redness there.
I thought maybe he'd start wearing a yarmulke to cover up that bald spot back there, because it was getting pretty up there. But I mean, listen, if you've been around Saban, I'm not a personal friend of Nick Saban's. I've been around.
I'm not either, but I've been around him,
and I can tell you, Brendan's first SEC media days, which was. What year was it? Maybe that was 15, 17 years ago. He wound up on an elevator with Nick Saban, just he and Nick. He was so blown away by his presence. You can feel the presence of a guy like that, and you can feel Nick Saban. And think about it, he's not a big guy.
No, not at all.
Realize how he's only like 5'8", 5'9", whatever. But he ruled with an iron fist. And so Saban was good. I know Spurrier had a lot of respect for him. Spurrier went out to accept an award with him this past off season, and he has a lot of respect for Nick. I love that Nick wanted the game to be preserved and protected. That he didn't want to see it change, but you could just tell you knew these changes were going to drive some good people out of coaching, and I think you're exactly right. That's factored in. That wasn't the only thing. That factored in for Nick's decision to think, how many more years do I have to look at this like this and go through this, buy players and whatever. So, yeah, I think it all does measure up.
It is interesting if you're an X's and O's geek as to the evolution of Nick Saban. His teams were all power, more run than pass. Then it became kind of a 50-50 deal.
Right.
Then in the 20-teens, they went from Hurts to Tua and the 4 first-round picks at receiver. They were spread it out, throw it all over the lot for a few years. And now, what did Nick finish with? Nick finished with a team. The quarterback did a little running around. But for the most part, Nick tried to bring it back to formations, power football, slow the game down a little bit. Let's have less snaps, not more. What did he talk about when Michigan beat them? What made Michigan so tough besides how good they were?
Yeah.
The fact that they huddled. All right. And they held their formation until near the end. And we had trouble making our defensive calls because he basically said, the no huddle teams, they line up in the same formation every time. We know what they're doing. And if they change their formation, we definitely know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And Michigan, he said, made it difficult on us because they did what? They huddled,
Yeah.
Only Nick Saban could get away with saying something like that.
Yeah.
But if you talk to anybody who coaches football, it's so true.
I love that. I did a column yesterday about looking at this championship round with no SEC team and seeing in there an SEC team looked like an SEC team, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan was a carbon copy of Georgia 3 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
And so I'm thinking to myself, is this the size and shape of things to come? And if it is, teams like Florida are in trouble because they don't have that. And they tried to the former UML made a comment about the trainer, hockey, forcing him to try to be faster, more athletic and whatever. When we know that girth and size was a factor for Florida, especially trying to stop somebody on third down.
But also Washington and some other teams have shown us here recently that, if you can get yourself a pro quarterback and if you can get yourself one or two guys on the outside that are really difficult to cover, if you're good elsewhere, maybe not great, maybe not even very good in all spots, but if you can be good everywhere else and have an NFL quarterback and two NFL wide receivers, you're going to be a problem.
And you'll get to the championship game but not lose it. But lose it to a team built like Michigan. I mean, Michigan.
But think about it, though. Washington, their quarterback had an off day. The key holding call early fourth quarter.
He couldn't get to his spot. They rushed him.
I understand, but I'm just saying Washington was closer to getting even with Michigan for large stretches of that game than the final score.
Until we got to the third quarter, and then things began to fall apart, and the quarterback you talked about was beat up. But I get what you're saying. The model worked good, but you built it on speed. I just think the new look of teams is going to be more like Michigan, like Georgia was, and less like Washington or
buddy, I think they will want to build themselves like Georgia, Michigan, Alabama. But, buddy, that's hard. That's the hardest team to build. To get all those guys at the point of attack on both sides of the ball is really difficult to do. You're much more likely to see teams who look like Washington than you are Michigan and Georgia because those teams are so hard to put together. And not only that,
that's what
Harbaugh had not one kid transferred from Michigan out of Michigan from 2022 to 2023.
Why?
Not one. Well, but I'm just saying, going forward, you know how hard that's going to be. What Michigan did, and also Georgia had hardly anybody transferred during their 2-year window. Also,
that's right. That's what I'm saying. The model that Kirby built in Athens, and now the Harbaugh built up in Ann Arbor, I'm afraid it's going to be the Arbor. Then it needs someone like Steve Spurrier to come along and reverse it the other way, which is what he did. Because when Spurrier came into the league as a player, whatever, those teams looked like that like Michigan did. Yeah. And he would say, hey, it's not about how size, it's not about how big and strong you are, it's about how quick you are. Man. And he changed all that. The question is, do you have enough talent like Michigan to hold that serve? And Michigan did. They could do it in the fronts, they could do it in the looks, and they had the power, they had the running game, the speed, the backs, and whatever. And they had elite athletes a lot of places, especially on defense. I was very impressed. Let me tell you about this. We'll go talk to our friend Loren Meadows, the coach, and get his take on it. First, I want to tell you about Titan MRI. Titan MRI is worth the short drive to Gainesville. No insurance is no problem. You pay with cash or card with same-day scheduling. That's a big thing. Start feeling better today if you're looking for an MRI because Titan MRI is North Central Florida's premier independent MRI facility. Come see why hundreds of patients are visiting our Gainesville location, Ocala, Marion County, surrounding areas, the villages. That's TitanMRI.com. Let's get it from a coach's perspective here. Dan, our friend Loren Meadows coached along for a while in college and high school ball, and the standpoint of building teams, and let's get his take on it. Loren, do you think the future teams of America will look more like Michigan? Good evening to you, Loren.
How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good, man.
Good to see you again.
You bet.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with Mr. Moulton. I think that to put together kind of the schemes and the operation that you see from a Michigan, it takes staying power, and I think he's correct. You know, you got guys that have been on that roster for a few years, run that system, been involved. And like we talked about before, the changing landscape with the transfer portal where guys are coming in and out, and you're even seeing the shuffling of the quarterback position, which is the most important position. You know, I would agree that teams are going to look like you're going to kind of almost catch lightning in a bottle with like a Washington, or even with Oregon in some ways the last couple of years with Bo Nix, where you get a resurrection. And that's kind of a tale where Florida could be. You know, you have a solid quarterback. I think you have some talent at wide receiver. And now if you can plug and play some of those interior positions, you know, I would say that, you know, with Michigan, like you said, where they huddle every play, there's a lot of shifts, motions, holding formations, things like that. It's tough. And then if you look at them on defense, it's one of the few defenses, you know, outside of Alabama and maybe Georgia, where they kind of play on a string. And when you see, you know, everybody fits in every gap, it's not helter skelter. And that takes time. I would be remiss to think that, you know, it took Michigan 30 years in between national titles. And I don't think if Jim Harbaugh stayed, they would be in the hunt next year. But I don't think you would see a string of titles. You know, sometimes teams like that, they kind of just fit in that mold. It's kind of like we talk about Alabama, and you guys will remember, it's like the Gene Stallings Alabama team, I think in '91. Very, very similar, very methodical, you know, would hit you, could get to you with four, you know, with Copeland and those guys. And, you know, I think that's where it was. So sometimes you have those moment in time teams, and I think that's where Michigan is. I think the norm you're going to see is more, let's try to make these puzzle pieces fit 1 to 2 years, catch lightning in a bottle. Now we got a 12-team playoff, see who's playing the best late in November, and let's go try to get 3 wins and get a championship. So, yeah, I would agree. I mean, as physical a team as Michigan was and as impressive, that blueprint, I think, only works for a certain type of individual, type of coach. To kind of try to duplicate that, I think would be tough.
Well, David, and I'll ask Loren the same question. How much poorer is college football without Nick Saban?
25%. And when Harbaugh goes to the NFL, add 5% to that. No, I think, you know, this is Coach K leaving college basketball, and Roy Williams and Jim Boeheim were right around him. I mean, when Harbaugh leaves also, if you had to, and Loren, when people talk about college football needs a commissioner, well, who'd be number one on the list? It'd be Nick. And you have to struggle to think who would be 2.
I'd say Spurrier, but
well, but I mean somebody who's active in the game currently.
No,
I mean, you know, when everybody's like, well, if we have Nick Saban should be the commissioner of college football, because also he's been speaking out, although Steve did it as well. I mean, I laugh, Loren, what was it, 10, 12 years ago when Steve was in South Carolina, and he said, you know, I think the players deserve a stipend. And people freaked out.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to put $300 a game in an account for them that they could get at the end of the year.
And they should have done it then. They wouldn't be the mess they're in if they'd done it.
Right. And that was 10 years ago, and now look where we are.
Yeah. Bill Carr, the former athletic director at Florida, sat me down and talked to me when I was there speaking to the quarterback club. And he said, I want to tell you a story sometime about the athletic directors of the early 80s, and I was one. We blew an opportunity to resolve the issue of this whole thing with the portal and the whole thing with paying players. All we had to do was follow the model of the Olympics when they started paying guys in 1980, and we would never have gotten to this. He blames himself and other ADs for not being thinking, oh, that'll never happen. They're living in the dark ages, you know. So, there's no doubt about it. It's going to be, I can't even believe how college football has changed so much, Loren and David, in the last couple of years, and what's going to be ahead now the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think that, we talk about it, like I told you about my timely meeting with Kevin Sumlin at a restaurant in Daytona. And I mean, he quickly turned to me and said, it's the new normal. You better get used to it, and it's changing. And, you look at guys that when I was growing up, the Jimmy Johnsons, the Lou Holtz, and so on, like you talk about Gene Stallings, Paterno, Earl Bruce, even John Cooper, Schembechler, Moeller, they don't make them. They won't be around anymore. And I think everybody's reaching for the Spurriers and the Bowdens of the world, and you're just not going to have that anymore. What we know as college football, the only thing we can hang our hat on is for 60 minutes every Saturday, it takes 4 downs. You get 4 downs to get 10 yards. The football field is still 53 and a third, and it's still 100 yards wide. But other than that, the personalities, the way things were, Mr. Moulton mentioned Dabo kind of hanging on. You better adjust because, we got the new video game coming out, which is going to shine even more light on NIL. It is going to be it's going to be interesting. I think you're going to have a lot of good football coaches taking, they're going to exchange 53 to 56, 57 grown men for 105 young men. And you're going to see a lot of good coaches, I think, being lured to that NFL money, which is still the world's most popular game, from a TV standpoint.
What's the line from Brad Pitt in Moneyball when he looks at his director of scouting and he goes, adjust or die?
Yeah.
And Dabo has been reluctant to adjust, and he just had his first season in 12 years where he didn't have 10 wins. So, and yet reportedly he still hasn't taken in a transfer kid this offseason either. I mean, love you, Dabo. Appreciate, fighting a good fight, but welcome to 8-4.
Yeah.
And let me ask you guys this too. I think what's interesting is, I think the presumptive thought is that kids are now going to the highest bidder.
And they are.
So if that's the case, where does, not just, we talk about people leaving the job, but where does the true art of coaching, what does that look like in 10 years? Because I consider myself a purist, someone who played and coached with the hand that he was dealt. But you don't have that anymore. So will it become the best power broker is the best coach, or do guys that would really sit down, scheme, commit to planning practices to where they truly, made their teams better? Does that go by the wayside?
I don't think so. I actually think the difference now could be better. It's just not a multi-year thing, Loren. But to me, imagine if Steve Spurrier was still coaching, all right, and if we were able to get him the dudes, we got the money together, we got him the dudes. How many times would Florida not have the best coach on the sidelines in that game? Think of the job he would do over 6, 8, 10 months with those guys. Now, if they want to get up and leave at the end of the year, Steve would be like, all right, get me another dude. But I think he would do a phenomenal job. I think Lane Kiffin is one of those guys. I think Lane gets more out of his roster than I think most everyone in the sport.
But in a way, it's what Loren's saying. It lends itself to mercenaries more than it does to guys come in there and build a program for 20 years. And that's just the game, the way it is. I've said a long time ago, it's here. You might as well learn to deal with it when you like it. Think back about this, guys. Think about the moment in the last year and a half when you said, this is it. This is awful. they're changing this game and it really feels wrong. Doesn't feel, and you got kind of angry about it. Loren, did you have a moment like that?
Absolutely. I'm there now. I'm a pure. I'm old. I'm rural West Virginia by blood. You know, I mean, I grew up. You know, I mean, I'm a football in the street kind of guy. I mean, this is a different game for me as a fan, and even since I've been working with you in the 3 years, it's changed, man. It's different, and it's been very tough for me to wrap my head around the 24-hour news cycle that now exists with, you know, Joe Schmo is on Archer Road eating at the Outback on his recruiting visit, and everybody's peeking through the window to see what he's doing. And I mean, it's crazy. It's different.
How about you, David? Was there a moment you had that, oh my gosh, they're ruining my game?
Well, they're really changing it, but you know, Buddy and you and I have debated and argued. See, I'm in favor of a lot of the changes, but I think they needed to have more structure while doing it, and they've had no structure while doing it, and that's why it's become the wild, wild west. But I mean, I did have a Division I head coach 2 weeks ago tell me and say, listen, this is how the recruiting process goes. All right. You show up to recruit the 4 or 5 star, and the recruit says to you, listen, before we get into everything, how much?
Yeah.
What are we talking?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so just, and he said, I'm just telling you, that's how it is nowadays.
Yeah.
There is the Woody Hayes stories of, you know, sitting in mom's kitchen for 3 hours and eating everything she put in front of him.
Wouldn't buy gas in Michigan.
Right. Mom tells the kid, you're going to go play football for that man. No. You know, that maybe they serve the, you know, the custard and what have you after they negotiate the deal.
Yeah. Well, Urban said the other day.
So you're going to pay me this? Oh, okay. That'll get you in the house. Come on in. Yeah. No. For that, you can come in and you can eat with us.
$5,000, you can have fried chicken, whatever. So bottom line is, Urban said the other day, he talked to one of the top college basketball coaches in America. I can tell you his name, but I'm not supposed to. Who said, you know what? I like it better. I don't have to waste time for 3 years recruiting a guy. He comes in, we visit. I say, how much? He says, that much. I'll say, I'll take you or I won't take you. Cuts to the chase. That's what it's like. It's kind of feels like prostitution, doesn't it, little guys? We just say how much, you know. But it takes a lot of romance out of the game. I don't think it's good for the game, but I don't know how to stop it. And you're right. It started out one way and it got worse. It got out of control. And now there are no controls.
Loren.
And the problem with guys like, and I was going to say, the reason I asked you to think of that moment when you thought, that's it, they're over the line. Think how Nick Saban felt in those moments. He died 1,000 deaths. Killed him.
And think about it, and yet Alabama had as much or more money than most everyone. They had all the history. He was a legendary coach. He got to say nobody puts more people in the NFL than us.
Yeah.
And think about how frustrated he's been, and he's had all the advantages.
Yeah, well,
and yet he's
it's
frustrated.
True. But that's that West Virginia blood we're talking about, too. Loren's talking about, too. It's different. And Nick's got that West Virginia blood in him. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. It's hard to know because it's a new way of doing business. The model is not what we're used to.
Loren, I contend, and, you know, who knows if any of us are going to be right about anything by the time this decade's over. But I contend that the only way now that we have the Wild Wild West, the only way to rein it in, so to speak, and set rules and guidelines that everybody can live by, we're going to have to make them employees. We're going to have to professionalize college sports where literally the players are going to have a union of some kind. There's going to have to be a collective bargaining, might even have to have salary caps, which will be very controversial because think about it. Certain schools are going to be like, I ain't going to do a salary cap. You kidding me? Right. We raise more. I mean, think about in the SEC. You think the SEC would ever agree to a salary cap? Hell no.
Absolutely not.
So we might have, Buddy, baseball. Like, you know, basketball and hockey have caps. Football has a cap. I have a feeling college football is going to be more like Major League Baseball because you're not going to get the big boys to agree to a cap, okay? Because they all think, well, you know, I outraised him. I'm not going to agree to play by the same rules as him. I got more money than him. Mm-hmm. But I really think that by the end of the decade, guys, they're going to be employees.
And
that's scary. That's scary to a lot of people.
It'll be, and I agree with that, because like you said, the only way you rein it in, like people talk about, congressional interference, and nobody wants that. I mean, that's so far down, but I mean, you hear those things mentioned, and it's like, then what does the college, is it truly college football? It's almost like they'll have to name it something else, because I'm not getting up going to 8:00 philosophy class as a freshman when I'm worth $4 million. I mean, that's going to be the thing. It's going to be interesting.
Don't you think the players all have the option? Hey, do you want the scholarship that goes with it? By the way, just so you know, if you take the scholarship, your salary's less, because we could replace you in that classroom with a student and get X amount a year. So just so you know, if you want the education, we'll give it to you. We'll be proud to give it to you. But just so you know, it means you're going to make less money.
Wow. Yeah. That's going to be interesting for sure. That's a lot to undress in an hour show at David Moulton. But no, it is. I agree. It is. We talked about where they lost the mark to rein this thing in, and now it's unbelievable, and the game's only getting more popular.
Yeah, great conversation with two guys who get it and know what's going on and follow the game closely, and like I do, love it. We just hope for the best, despite itself. Is college football is going to survive as we know it? Let's certainly hope so, but I can't wait to see what the next iteration is of this game, because right now it feels a little different, as you said, with Nick Saban being gone, lost from the great football player, well, the greatest coach of all time. It makes a difference, David. You're sighing, and it's a big deal. So sorry, Alabama fans, you had it good for a long time. Nothing lasts forever. Just ask people in Florida.
There's a lot of crying now.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And I guess the $1 million, I mean, really, if you can get that bet right in Vegas, I mean, because really, who knows? And who really, do you want that job? That's the other thing. Do you even want it?
You don't want to be the guy that presses the guy. That's the worst thing you can do. So,
yeah.
Hey, we'll leave it right there. Great job tonight, David. Appreciate it very much. Listen to David Moulton, Miller and Moulton in the morning. He's on there about 8 days a week. Check him out. And soon to be coming to a neighborhood near you in Gainesville. I'm told he's even there. I'm told he's there. Well, that'll be exciting. Good to hear, David. Good show. And Loren, as usual, thank you for your insight on the game. Great show. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good night. And good luck. God bless, Nick Saban. You brought it, man. It's great. Thank you. All right, folks. Thank you very much to two illustrious guests, as we love having on the program, David Moulton and Loren Meadows. We'll tell you about what's coming up tomorrow night. It's Orange and Blue Blood Thursday. We'll have our usual gang here with us, including Ben Troop, Fran Spirit, who's at the basketball game. Last I heard, it was tied 40-40. We'll see. And hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Thank you to Rob Brown. Don't forget, listen to Sidelines. It's a special program which is coming near you soon. You want to be a part of that. I want to tell you about my special friends at WinStar who make this program possible, along with all of our sponsors, but particularly WinStar, who've been my sponsor for now 5 years. And in Ocala, does a terrific job as a stakeholder in downtown, cares about their community, care about you. That's why they have a patient-centered clinical research facility right there at WinStar with cutting-edge clinical research trials to Ocala in areas like Alzheimer's, dementia, psoriasis, osteoarthritis, migraine, fibromyalgia, along with many other things that affect us in this community. They're always looking for ways to give us better medical treatment. That's why they have these clinical research trials. They've had over 700 since 1998. Continue to partner with prominent pharmaceutical and biomedical companies throughout the medical industry. They bring that information to them. They want you to take part if you would, because that helps them give them the DNA they need to put into their studies. If you want to be a part of the study and possibly get compensated for your time and travel, go to rinstar.net, look it up. They'll tell you how you can be a part of those high-quality patients in a clinical research trials. WinStar Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Thanks very much, folks, for listening and watching. And we'll be back with you tomorrow night with our team. And hope you enjoy the evening.